Throughout chess history, we have a number of iconic and brilliant games, and we've covered a couple recently. The Fischer game when he was just 13 years old, which wouldn't have happened really if Donald Byrne hadn't played the blunder, it seems, bishop g5. If he just got on with casting, we wouldn't have seen that brilliancy with the king exposed in the centre. And in this masterpiece of a game, Kasparov Topalov, referred to often as Kasparov's immortal game, we also see a similar idea that the king attack could have been avoided potentially. So there's a big fun spoiler move, which was never played, thankfully. I'm not sure if it occurred to Topalov. He did think a long time on his reply after rook takes d4 was played. So fun spoilers, I mean, they're a useful resource in our own over the board games. If you really trust that the opponent has worked everything out in great detail, sometimes it pays just to avoid all of that brilliance, especially if they've just spent, say they've just spent half an hour thinking about this brilliant combination, and you've got this option to throw something else into the mix that they haven't maybe considered, something at the very entrance of the combination. So it's a fun spoiler. It's like you know, IMDb, the film site. If you're going to do a big comprehensive review, you've got to warn if your review contains spoilers. Now in chess, a spoiler, a fun spoiler, is a move which basically avoids potentially a brilliant film, in effect. So you know, which the game becomes like a brilliant film later, especially if video annotated, literally does become a film on YouTube, the game. So here there's a potential for a fun spoiler, just avoiding actually all of the fun of the king getting exposed here after rook takes d4. But it would require Topalov to have immensely deep calculation if he did want to actually firmly work out if taking the rook here after Kasparov's rook takes d4 was actually unsound or not. Now, how do we kind of, you know, at that level, you're 2700, you're not really expected to sort of trust the opponent, especially if you've got a tactical reputation, you're a strong tactical player. You know, if you can't see the attack, or you think it's unsound, you'd probably, you know, you at 2700, I think most 2700s are kind of obliged to test it, to test the opponent. You know, is it really sound or not? And avoidance moves maybe are not considered, but avoidance moves are often really powerful. In one of my Blitz live commentary 15-minute games recently, the opponent did this queen sack, which, you know, maybe instead of calculating all that, I could have just gone for his king. I could have completely avoided all the brilliance. So they're fun spoilers for the opponent. So here, if you were black, can you see a major fun spoiler move from black after rook takes d4? So you don't want to get involved in the intricacies of the brilliant film which emerges after your king's exposed, basically. What kind of fun spoiler move do you think exists in this position? So if I give you 10 seconds... or you might want to stop the video. Okay, so I'll give you 10, starting from now. So black to play. What can you play here to avoid the whole thing that we saw in the previous video? Okay. The move which has been noted by many annotators, and I did include this in the PGN in my small defence. Unfortunately, I realised too late, and it should have been in the main video, was this move, king b6. Now, it's not usual to use your king to try and munch material, but that knight actually turns out to be a tactical liability, of course, on a5. That knight, as well as this bishop, you know, is a tactical liability. We saw an engine line where there was h5, h4 in one of the variations, hitting that bishop. But engines do pick up on tactical liabilities, and both of these guys... Okay, they're somehow, from this disarray, they're coordinating in mating nets in some of the variations of this game, but they are tactical liabilities in their own right, because they're loose pieces. So a5 can actually be picked up on with king b6. There are some Kasparov games where actually he's lost to Petrosian, the master of king walking. There's one or two we've got videos on this channel where Petrosian beat Kasparov with these remarkable king movements, which Kasparov didn't really anticipate. And sometimes in my own over-the-board attacks, sometimes I completely underestimate the king marches. And in fact, we have a celebrated king march a few months back when Carlsen well, in December, wasn't it, when Carlsen put his king in the centre, the exchange down and won brilliantly. So sometimes king moves are fantastic moves. If we put an engine here to work on this position from scratch, Houdini 2.0 version B, I should be going to version C, we'll put this to work, and king b6 does seem to come up, as well as c takes d4. The engine doesn't really know what's going on after c takes d4. It thinks black's got an advantage, and it's sort of switching back, but we don't really know the reasons here. We can follow this line a little bit. It seems to go to 0 though, as though there's a forced check. So once it realised, with alpha beta pruning, once it realised it's a dead draw after c takes d4 at minimum for white, there seems to be a drawing opportunity. So that's the best it can get from c takes d4. It rules that out actually, with alpha beta pruning being brutal. It finds out that king b6, simple move king b6, actually guarantees a small advantage for white, technically, at minus 0.32. Now these engine evaluations, they say Houdini's kind of a little bit of Rybka's in there, and Rybka's evaluations are kind of modest. So when it says 0.23, you know, we're talking a small advantage. The evaluations of Fritz were known to be quite, you know, a lot higher than Rybka. So why is it a small advantage? Well, the reason's quite simple, you know. As well as being a fun spoiler, everything's left hanging. Look, the knight and the rook are left hanging here. What was Kasparov thinking about? Was it a bluff? No, he just didn't see king b6, I expect. You can see very deeply, but can you see very broadly at all times? We're not computers. And as a computer, you know, Topalov, okay, he might have missed king b6, and he didn't need to look at all the other stuff to prove or disprove the huge combination. I don't know what to say here. What do you guys think? Would you have seen king b6 and avoided this brilliance? If you couldn't disprove rook takes d4, do you actually play king b6? I mean, really? It's rook, you know, it's tempting, it's a rook. You have to see the next check to realise something's up, really, because that next check with the rook, something's definitely up. You know, there's potential for a draw. If you can see there's potential for a draw though, but moving the king, you know, just to attack a loose piece coming up the board doesn't seem the sort of thing you'd want to volunteer for anyway. Okay, so let's look at it anyway. So king b6. Now, if white retreats the knight, okay, this is going to be truly bad, surely. Is it c takes d4 here? No, actually, interestingly, it's not. It's just this dislocated pawn, which I mentioned was an issue with the whole thing. It's still not as dislocated, because if taking that exposes black anyway. And here we've got a minus 0.48. Again, the alpha beta pruning effect, indicating that other things are more risky. Let's have a quick look, of course, at just c takes d4. Is that a disaster? Check. So where does the king move? King c7, check. Knight c5, and white, pardon me, why is this much better for white? Can he not play to protect the bishop? Right, if rook b8, for example, there's rook e7 here apparently. So what's going on here? Take. Knight takes a6 check. Queen c5. And this is mating clearly. Okay, that's pretty bad news, this knight a6 and queen c5 business. And in this position, was there anything else? No, king d8 is not possible. That just loses the rook. So that's pretty nifty anyway. So in this position, even if king b6 had initially been seen, there's other stuff after that, which does sort of show that king b6 is fundamentally, in many respects, a risky move if the knight just retreats. So here, king c7 is ruled out, king b7, and again we've got this other rook sack coming in. So say queen takes here, we've got knight a5 check, and now d6 check. So either way, it's going to be a mate in 3 now. Rook takes d6, check. Okay. So king moves, queen b8 is mate. Bishop b7, queen b7. That's all winning as well. So clearly, after knight b3, taking the rook looks like a disaster for black. Okay, but let's follow up now. Forget taking the rook. Bishop takes d5, avoidance again, fun spoiling again. So here, apparently, black is in theory half a pawn up, minus 0.50, where 1 is 1 pawn, let's say. So why is black a pawn up? Rook takes, sorry, queen takes, rook d2. Actually, it's not so bad, is it? Because by black taking that pawn, there's a pin now on the d file. Okay, but the king on b6 is an advantage for the end game. As the end game approaches, it's better for the king to be more involved sometimes. So if black can support d5, and you know this bishop and knight don't seem to be speaking to each other much in this game, coordinating very well. So black does look significantly better. He's now, after unpinning, he's threatening bishop takes f3. And if white's really forced to defend that pawn with rook f2, this looks fairly miserable. It's a fairly miserable looking position. Black's beautiful position. He's avoided the fun of the brilliant game. We wouldn't have had the fantastic attacking masterpiece that we did. So a lot of attacking masterpieces do rely on king safety being emphasised, either through a blunder or through accepting a combination which maybe didn't need to be accepted, or a variety of other reasons. But we wouldn't get the brilliance if we didn't get the king hunt. A lot of brilliant games are based on king hunts. So in this position, yes, black's better. Black's better. Is black winning? Well, it's actually changing its tune. You know, it's equal on pawns, actually. If we count pawns, it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6. Clearly, black's got better centralisation and better minor pieces here working together. But it's not such a big deal. You know, maybe this knight could be re-centralised. The rooks, okay, emphasise that they're doubled on the d file. Black's better. Okay, this bishop is better than this one. But it's not completely, you know, easily decisive. You know, maybe white could grovel on. Let's play a move like bishop. Okay, b4, bishop g4. Can white grovel on? In all honesty, take rook here. Well, if that's offered for double pawns for some reason, okay. Well, h2 is now on. It's tricky. It's not completely clear cut still, because the evaluation, as you see, is not absolutely decisive for black. So some people saying it's an absolute, you know, as though black was winning. That's not the case. It seems. It seems you have to repeat the avoidance strategy and actually take this pawn. Now, so knight b3 might be plausible, and there's a lot of analysis relating to the move b4 as well. But knight b3 was the second candidate to examine. Okay. Now b4, I think actually is very interesting to consider as well. I think Kasparov had done consideration of this move. So b4, we have to have a look at this clearly. It supports the knight, so it keeps the optimism of the advanced knight outpost on a5. So here, what does black do? Does he take the rook here? It's a disaster, I expect, because the engine's giving queen f4 are slightly better for black. Let's take the rook here. Mate in 3. Queen takes d4. Check. And then it's going to be mate. Okay. Bad idea to take the rook. So take the queen, still avoiding all the brilliance of white's play. But then we have rook takes f4. And we seem to be entering a position where this f-pawn and this loose knight are exposed. But this pawn is right for taking, and also b4 surely is going to be a weakness now, along with the tactical liability that it supports. Along with maybe this c3, there's weaknesses on white's queen side here. So rook takes f7. Engine evaluation here. Actually, from an engine point of view, it seems knight b3 was even stronger than b4, because the evaluation here is just minus 0.19. And you might think that's a bit surprising, because contrast this to the other variation. Isn't b4 like dropping off here? Okay, so let's win b4. and expose that pesky knight on a5. So in this position, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, equal on pawns, but less pawns for both sides. But black doesn't seem to be dominating down the d file like any other variation. So maybe, you know, it seems pardon me, if it's minus 0.24 here, then black is less better than the other variation. Pardon me. So actually, that's an evaluation shift. If we just pursue this a little bit more, rook d6, exchange off rooks as an idea. There's nothing much in it. It's when we're getting to like a tenth of a pawn, or okay, a fifth of a pawn. There's nothing much in it here. Black's d file is still significant. Move like c3. You know, white's rook is active. There's a 3-to-1 pawn majority over here. There's a 2-to-1 over here. It's about equal now. So actually, that b4 also shows great promise after the initial evaluation, where in this position, after this pesky king b6, okay, b4 is now showing as better as knight b3. So have we missed anything? I'm sure we have. I'll have to put PGN in the description, which will be the whole game, but focusing on this. So b4 would appear to be a good move, because basically white has snatched a pawn with rook takes d4. So if the rook's not taken, he's just nabbed a pawn. So basically 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. For the moment, 3, 4, 5, 6. For a moment, white is a pawn up. He can afford to lose the d pawn and then be equal on pawns. So after losing the d pawn, he's still equal on pawns, but he's got the active rook now on the 7th rank. In fact, after winning that second pawn, he's again a pawn up. So for black to equalise on pawns, black takes on b4 and now is equal on pawns again. We can't really say that black's clearly winning this. Engine evaluation 0.19. It's modest evaluation because it's based on Rybka, I think, Houdini, which was always famous for modest evaluations. So the knight, a tactical liability, is retreated back. And we have here rook d6 for some reason. Or bishop d5 or bishop c6. Okay, say bishop d5 attacking the rook as another example. Check. We've got a 3-to-2 pawn majority over here. Surely white is okay. Exchange off rooks. Bishop d7, one of the strongest moves for some reason. Maybe gaining access to the 7th rank via e7. But rook e7 is not played here. Rook e5 is preferred. But what would happen if rook e7 here? There's rook f7 to exchange off rooks forcibly. So it's more flexible maybe to do something else. So say rook e5. So we're about equal again. It's nothing really to say that rook takes d4 actually loses for white by force. We haven't really picked on that idea if we go back. So we go back to this rook takes d4 and this amazing move king b6, which is a attempted fun spoiler. But white did pick up a pawn. He is temporarily a pawn up. So he supports the knight, it seems. That could be the strongest move in the position, according to this brief analysis anyway. b4 should be, it's giving it about equal now. Okay, no, it's slightly better for black. But that sort of advantage for black is disappearing. Was there anything else apart from queen takes f4? Knight takes d5 allows white to exchange off queens. Now b takes, check, supporting the rook, putting the king back. This should be about equal. So any other thing to explore? White looks actually quite comfortable here because the knight's pinned. So king b2 avoids knight c3 check, and now white's ready for rook d1. So that should be dead equal there. Agreed? I hope so. So let's go back, and what else was there then after b4? I don't think the queen can move back. This is going to be asking for trouble. The queen hasn't got any squares to move back anyway. C takes b4 is probably asking for trouble. It's just reinforcing surely the knight. Actually, even better than apparently taking on b4 is taking the queen. Then take the knight, and you've got the reinforced knight. And if black's really going to take that, he's walking into a pin surely. King b2 to avoid the knight c3, and white's ready to double rooks. So white should be okay. In fact, here it seems c4 and king b3 interesting. It's tactical, but king b3 apparently, if white's going to echo black's cheekiness with king moves, that protects the pawn, which will be protecting the knight after. And if knight takes b4, rook takes d6 is check. Okay, let's just see that. Not that, sorry, rook takes d6. I think there's going to be c4 in this line for rook d4. Rook d4 check is answered by c4. So we've seen, I hope we've demonstrated, and I guess one of you guys is going to try and refute this, that the fun spoiler move doesn't actually win by force for black. Remember, white has just taken a pawn with rook takes d4. So I hope this has been a fairly comprehensive look for the omission in the previous video. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.